friends of Tales of the Night. In this special 4-episode series, we revisit the story of the First Communion. This saga includes all the editions that have appeared so far, as well as the stories that you, members of the community who live, or have lived in the area, or had knowledge of the events described in the first story, have subsequently sent us. We conclude with a couple more unpublished stories, one of which perhaps gives us the most concrete clues about the origin of what has been narrated. You are listening to Tales of the Night. I'm about to tell you about a period in my life that continues to affect my family, which my primary school classmates from that time still talk about, although I lost touch with all of them. Recently at a gathering, someone I didn't know asked me if I was that boy, the one to whom everything had happened. My family insists that much of what I'm going to tell you didn't happen, that it's my imagination, a resource of my brain to cope with the trauma. Even so, I'm sure that many of those who have lived around here will know the legends and even the characters I'm about to name. I remember it all perfectly, as if it were yesterday, just weeks before I finished my catechism and made my first communion. Carlos, my brother, 3 years older than me, hadn't made his first communion. For some reason, he always refused and never wanted to tell my mother why. And therefore, my doing it became a kind of obsession for her. The first few times I went to catechism, she was so excited that she would take me herself and hang around, helping in the church and looking after Mary Carmen, my little sister, who was 3 years old at the time, until I finished. However, after a few times, Mary Carmen would start crying as soon as we approached the church, located on a steep hill in the Guaycura neighborhood of Tijuana. She said she was afraid of the ladies in black, referring, we thought, to the nuns who lived in the convent next to the church. And so, much to her regret, she would let me go, accompanied by a Greek boy who lived 2 streets away from home and whose father always took him. However, only on one occasion after that did she accompany us, and then we began the journey to the church, to each catechism, alone, Diego and I. There was something strange about those days. Perhaps there weren't as many people in the neighborhood as there are today. But even so, I remember those journeys we made in what seemed to be a deserted neighborhood, when only the strangest inhabitants dared to go out. On one occasion, we left the church late. Well, not that late, but late enough for it to start getting dark and for us to rush to get to our homes. Instead of going down the main street, we took one of the alternate ones. It was much more solitary, but the path was shorter. We passed by the elementary school, a few blocks from the church, and a sound coming from inside caught our attention. Hearing something at those hours in a deserted school, my first reaction was to run. But I turned around a few meters ahead and noticed that Diego wasn't running beside me. I stopped. Diego was peeking, climbing on the fence, looking inside the school at the 6th grade classrooms, very close to the exit. I slowly went back and asked him what he was looking at. In whispers, he answered me in the same way. "Be quiet. She's going to see us." Then I saw what he was referring to. Inside the classroom, 3 meters from the school fence and barely illuminated by the street lamplight, the figure, the silhouette, of a nun looking outside, motionless, macabre. I started running again, this time much harder, as fast as the extra kilos I had back then allowed me. Now I could feel the footsteps of Diego running to my right. When a block later, without stopping, I asked him what the hell someone would be doing inside the school at that hour. When I turned, I realized it wasn't Diego running beside me. Next to me ran a boy in strange clothes, blonde, who wouldn't stop looking at me and smiling. And I wanted to run faster and turn at the next street, even though that took me away from the path home at that moment. But the little boy, unfazed, ran at the same speed as me, laughing at me. I reached the main street again, and finally lost him. I was totally exhausted. I stopped to rest and then, hiding, running from lamp to lamp, to take advantage of the darkness of the streets back then, I managed to get close to my street again, almost unnoticed. A block from home, I saw my mother walking hurriedly with Marikamen. She was obviously worried because it was already late and I hadn't arrived. When she saw me, I noticed her gaze lit up with pleasure, but immediately changed to angry eyes that started scolding me for the worry I had caused her. "Now go up to the church and look for your brother," she told me. My blood ran cold. The last thing I wanted was to go up again. But when I tried to explain what had happened to me, she scolded me without believing anything. Crying, I began my journey again, going up through the neighborhood to look for Carlos, who had gone up to look for me. A few blocks ahead, a scream alerted me. And suddenly, from the darkness, two figures were running towards me at full speed. I wanted to run towards my house, but out of fear, I think, my legs became absolutely clumsy, and I only felt myself stumble. The figures were approaching. You could even hear their breathing. One ran over me, and the other grabbed me by the arms and lifted me up. It was my brother Carlos, and without saying anything, I knew something was chasing them. I realized that the figure now running in front of us was Diego, and he turned when he reached my street. He ran into it, even going without us. He was very scared, I know, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to run at that pace for 2 more streets until he reached his house. When we entered, I was horrified. Diego's face was covered in blood, and my mom attended to him immediately, while ordering us to call his father. Diego wouldn't stop crying, and the more she cleaned the blood from his face, the more terrified I became. It looked as if a firecracker had exploded in his face, and he had pieces of skin hanging. His father wasn't there. He didn't answer, but after a few minutes one of his neighbors arrived, and they took him to the emergency hospital. My mother wouldn't stop asking us what had happened, but I had no idea, and Carlos swore he didn't know what had happened to him either. Because of the fright we all had, my mother didn't insist anymore. She prepared a very light dinner for us and sent us to bed. Carlos then approached to tell me that he was going to tell me what he had seen, but that I had to swear not to tell my mom. He then told me what had happened. My mom was very worried about me, so she sent him to look for me. He ran up through the neighborhood and was more or less halfway between the house and the church, almost reaching the school, when he heard the sound of something passing over him, as if flying. He looked up, but there was nothing, so he continued. However, after advancing just a few steps, a child's voice called him from behind. "Hey, he's over here." When he turned, he saw a boy pointing him to the turn towards the street. And by the description, it was the same boy who had run beside me when I was moving away from the school. "He's one of the gypsy kids. You must have seen him," he told me. What he saw when running towards that street was a lump right in the middle of it. A black lump that was moving over something or someone. Even though the image was macabre, impressive, he picked up a stone and threw it at it, thinking that maybe it was me who was there, being attacked in some way. It was a very strange figure, but human, no doubt, and that didn't make him feel any less dread. He then hit that thing with a huge stone, and it let out a squeal and ran off to the other end of the street, taking huge leaps. Carlos ran towards the figure of a bloodied child who, upon reaching him, he realized was Diego. He lifted him up and asked about me. and he told him that I had managed to run down the main street. Diego looked behind Carlos, barely able to open his eyes because of the blood, and without saying anything, ran off in the opposite direction like a bat out of hell. Carlos turned and saw a group of 4 nuns approaching in a line towards him. In a completely bizarre way, with their hands clasped in front, as if praying and as if taking very short steps under their habits, but approaching at an impressive speed, as if running towards him. He started running too, and after a few blocks, he found me walking backwards, in fear, until I slipped. That's when he picked me up, and we managed to get home right behind Diego. Mom won't believe us, but I had seen them before, he told me. They dress like nuns, and sometimes they come near the church. They walk around and stare. You know why I didn't make my first communion? He asked me. Because you don't believe in God? I said more in a questioning tone than answering with certainty. No, it was because of them. I'm going to tell you. He then began his story. I went to 2 catechism classes too. They were even earlier back then, and we would stay to play soccer in the space next to the church, right in front of the convent. The nuns were very kind. We even sometimes knocked on their door and they would give glasses of water to all the children. That's why we were surprised one time by a group of nuns dressed completely in black, who seemed to be cursing us in low voices while we played soccer. But they weren't on the church side, but on the side, on the street that passes just above the field where we were playing. They were really saying bad things, very bad things. We were ignoring them until one of the smaller children approached them to pick up a ball. One of them then ran towards him as if she was going to grab him, and he started running towards us, crying while the others laughed out loud, almost howling. As we watched them, the convent door opened behind us and one of the little nuns shouted at us to get into the church. We all ran, but I managed to turn around. 2 young nuns came out of the convent, heading quickly, almost threateningly, towards the others who were next to the church grounds. And these, upon seeing them, started to run, but laughing horribly. I remember then that one of our catechists, who was barely a teenager herself, approached us and asked us not to stay playing so late again, much less when they had been there. I then asked her if those nuns in black were bad, and she told me that of course they weren't nuns, but that they were crazy people who just wanted to scare us. At that moment, my brother paused in his story. He took a deep breath, as if a painful moment had come, and then continued. But I'm sure they were worse than she thought. That they didn't just want to scare us. Shortly after we first saw them, what happened to Alan happened. Carlos stopped again in his story, and I knew why. I knew what he was referring to. Alan was a classmate of his who had died. They didn't tell me exactly how because I was very young, but I knew it had been in a very ugly way. And among the first grade kids at school, completely crazy things were told about it. For those who don't know the Guaycura neighborhood, it's on a kind of small hill and ends in a ravine on one of its sides. These ravines led to a stream with an icy dirt road. Today there's already one of the busiest boulevards in Tijuana. But in the early 1990s, none of that existed. Alan's body had been found there in the stream. I remember well that several children gathered from the ravines, where the neighborhood streets ended, to see all the movement of patrol cars and curious people who arrived at the place. Alan was playing soccer with us that day we saw them. My brother continued, and then he saw them again, one night, very close to the school. When he said that, I remembered the vision that Diego and I had had a while ago, at the school. I thought about what might have happened to him. Perhaps if my brother hadn't arrived when they knocked him down in the street. And although they may laugh at me, that's the easiest part. to believe. From there on, the most macabre and bizarre things of my experience occurred. Don't miss the next episode, the next chapter to this story. This has been Tales of the Night.